Hey fellow cartographers, it's Josh with Map Effects. In my last video I showed you how to draw pine forests and more of that organic impressionist style on your fantasy map. But what if you want to also add some jungles and be able to distinguish between the two? Well, in today's video I'm going to walk you through how. Let's start mapping. So to draw our jungle, the first thing that we want to do is come up to our layer panel and just create a new layer above our paper texture. So then I'm going to select the Kohl Sketcher brush that's included in the Modern Map Maker Essential Brush Pack. And we're just kind of laying out the jungle roughly where we want it placed on our map. And then we can just come in here and just lay down a really rough shape. Doesn't need to be anything too fancy. And then what I like to do is I'll come in and add some contour lines, and all this is doing is just defining a little bit of the shape, and this will inform where we end up putting some of the details in the following steps. We can just clean this up a little bit, and I'm just going to come up to the layer panel and I'm going to lower the opacity of this sketch a little bit. I'll maybe keep it a little bit darker so you guys can see, and then create another layer above your sketch and just make sure that it's above the sketch itself. And then I'm going to switch to a darker brown for the line art and switch to the stone liner brush that's also included in the Modern Map Maker brush pack. So in my previous tutorial I showed you how to draw some of these pine forests with a much more vertically dominant stroke, as you can see. And if you wanted to draw some deciduous forests, you would use a little bit more like a cloud-like shape. And you can see it gives it a much different look. But if we're doing a jungle, we're still going to base it off of this, because if you look at aerial photographs, they still kind of have that rounded shape to them. But we also wanted to still have kind of a distinctive jungle look to it. So you can start with these kind of rounded shapes, but then what you want to do is come in and add some more like broadleafs, like you would for like a palm tree. And then you can also add some little tufts, almost like you're drawing little tufts of grass. And the main thing that you're trying to do is just mix it up and have a lot of variety of different shapes in the silhouette. There we go. Add a couple over here, and then we can come down here and just add another row and just keep using a variety of different strokes, like these rounded shapes, these more tufts of grass. But you can see then you have your pine forest, your deciduous forest, and your jungle, and they all kind of have a unique silhouette to them so that you can tell what they are on your map. So I'm just going to clear this, and let's zoom in over on this side a little bit, and I'm just going to start by using that same cloud-like stroke, add a couple of broadleafs in here. And you're just kind of following the contour line that we laid down in the sketch, and this is going to give your map a lot of depth and kind of indicate a little bit of the underlying terrain. And then you can just begin another row. You don't have to place it directly on the contour line. I just chose to just for simplicity's sake. But you're just kind of working your way all the way across. You can leave larger breaks in the tops of the forest. You don't want this to have a perfectly solid line. You kind of want to vary the width of your brush, have little breaks along the way, and that'll kind of give it a little bit of variety and really lends to that organic shape. And then you can see I'm just kind of coming through and adding in a few more ridges using that varied pattern. Come in and add the base of the forest, and you can see I'm still using kind of that broken line, but the stroke is a little bit thicker to kind of indicate some drop shadow. And you can see that I'm just kind of bringing it in behind the tree line that's in front of it, and it's just a simple way to add a lot of depth. And you can see I just turned off my sketch just so we can see better. I like to do that once I kind of have the basic form of the jungle down, so then I'm not sticking too closely to the sketch any longer. And then you can just kind of come in here and add some little tufts of trees, and you're really just focusing on adding texture at this point, just kind of fleshing it all out. And I usually like to work fairly small when I'm doing this, so that I'm not getting too fixated on some of the details. Alright, I'm going to open up my layers panel, and we're going to create another layer above our sketch below our line art. And I'm going to switch to this weathered liner brush and pick the background color. And I'm going to just kind of shift the hue a little bit more towards green. And I'll switch the blend mode on that layer to multiply, so it should darken everything. And then I'm just going to come in here, let's make this a little bigger, come in here with this weathered liner brush and just block in the color. Thing I like about this brush is it has a little bit of a ragged edge to it, so you don't have to worry about making it too perfect. You can just kind of follow the edge of this and not worry too much about getting it within every single line. You're just kind of blocking this all in really roughly. We want that more painterly look. So let's create another layer, and we're going to set this blend mode to multiply as well. And I'm going to switch my color kind of to a little bit more of a grayish blue. And I'm going to switch my brush to this textured wash that I like to use for a lot of my shading. Decrease the opacity a little bit. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. And then we can just start painting in some really broad shadows. Try to think of this jungle as one large object rather than something that's made up of a bunch of individual trees. And you can also put in a little bit of shadow even on the highlighted side. You can see I'm kind of following those ridge lines that I put in before, and using those as a bit of a guide to where I want shadow to kind of create a little bit of overlap. And also put a little bit of drop shadow at this point at the base. And I like to use my smudge tool to kind of blend things out a little bit at this phase. Alright, come up here, another layer, set it to multiply, and I'm going to increase the opacity of the brush but make it a little bit smaller. And now we can kind of come in and start painting in some more of those shadow details. Again, we're kind of using our line art as a guide and just imagining where the light would be most hidden based on the shape of the trees, based on the shape of the entire jungle. You just want to make sure that you're putting more of the shading on this right side of the jungle where it would be more in shadow, because our light source is coming from more the upper left. But you can see I'm still adding in just a little bit of shading on this left side. Try to keep it a little bit more subtle, but you do want to have some depth over here as well. Okay, come up to the layer panel, and we're going to create a new layer, but this time we're going to set it to screen. And I'm going to switch my color kind of to this lighter beige color. We'll still use the same brush, but again, we'll turn the opacity down, make it a little bit bigger. And as I said, our light source is coming more from the upper left, so we're kind of just blocking in some really broad highlights at this point, just on the left side of the forest. And actually, I'm going to come up here and switch this from screen to add, because it gives it a little bit more punch to the color. Sometimes screen can end up making things look a little bit too flat, but your mileage may vary. Just blend this out a little bit. Erase a little bit of the highlight so it's not too overpowering. Okay, it's looking better. All right, create a new layer, set it to add again. And with the same brush, we're going to increase the opacity now and make it smaller. And now we're starting to paint in some of those highlight details. So just look at the tops of the trees And again, you want to use your line art as a bit of a guide to where you're going to be placing some of these highlights. Don't worry about making them too perfect. You just want to kind of pop in a couple highlights there, and I like to zoom out, as I said before, so that I don't get too fixated on trying to draw every individual highlight on leaves. I'm really just looking at texture and trying to give it a little bit more character. Add a few more here on the top. And you can also decrease the opacity of your brush and just add a little bit of highlights on the shadowed side. You don't want it to look too flat, but try to use a little bit of subtlety at this point. Just brighten that up. All right, so let's just adjust the opacity on this last layer we just added until we get something that we like. And that's pretty much all there is to it. I look forward to seeing your map.